Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Michelle Dench. I'm an astrologer, and I'm here today to do a continuation of the talk that I did back in the solstice time. I did a part one conversation around the solstice and the turning point, and this is the continuation of it. I'm calling this turning the wheel because my intention today is to share with you some perspectives on the latter part of this year, and also to offer some insight into the retrograde period, which is really already underway for those who are tracking and watching all of this very closely as I am. I need screen sharing permission, and then I will be able to share the chart with you. It says host disabled participant screen sharing. There we go. All right, wonderful. So here we are in the present moment, and we have already Pluto retrograde back into the sign of Capricorn, Saturn retrograde, and recently Neptune also turning retrograde in the sign of Pisces. Those stronger, longer outer planets are, already beginning this deeper excavation. This is our, third almost pass of this last little bit of the Capricorn, but it is not the last pass of Pluto through the sign of Capricorn. It is, however, I think one of the most important, in that we are about to see a shift in the nodal axis from the sign of Taurus and Scorpio into the sign of Aries and Libra. And we are going to see the sun moving through an opposition to Pluto right after this new moon. So really, even in the coming days here, we have some of the most powerful transits of the year, literally turning the wheel of fate. Turning the wheel. We think of the nodes as a very fated and karmic aspect in astrology. And not only that, but Pluto in square to the nodal axis is intensifying that. And if you've heard some of my talks in the past, I did a longer talk on the Pluto-Venus cycle and the Venus retrograde cycle that's on the EA Zoom channel. I also did a talk, back on the solstice where I highlighted some of these core dynamics as the sun ingressed into the sign of Cancer. But even in the coming days here, we will have the sun moving towards the last degrees of Cancer. We've got this new moon in Cancer, where first the moon is going to oppose Pluto and then move into the sign of Leo. And Venus is getting very close to her station degree. She'll be stationing at 28 degrees 36 minutes of Leo. So you can see she's already there. She's slowing down. The moon will pass through a conjunction to her and enter the sign of Virgo. The moon is going to move through a conjunction to Mars and then get to the late degrees of Virgo with the asteroid goddess Lilith when the sun makes its opposition to Pluto. And that's on the same day that the nodal axis is really moving and tightening into this first exact square of Pluto to the nodes. Now, if you've been following this from an EA perspective, the resolution node, or the node where we're resolving these Pluto dynamics through, is the south node, and the ruler of that node becomes Venus when the nodes move into Aries and Libra. And then we have Venus stationing at her retrograde degree, 28 36. In fact, and I can continue here a little bit later on in the day, and you'll see the station. There it is. So late Saturday, later in the day, 7:30-ish Pacific Standard Time. And all of this is significant because Venus's retrograde kicks off a cycle with the South Node that I think reflects the deeper calling that we're all facing right now. How do we resolve, one, being seen, the desires of the heart, the shadows that stand in the way of those desires, and all of that resolving through the South Node in Libra, resolving through relationship, resolving through communication, through balance, through harmony. But this is not harmony that is devised from self-sacrificing. This is harmony that results as a deeper calling to honesty in the places in our lives where we have been out of alignment. Looking more deeply at the places within our heart where we haven't listened to a calling that has been calling us for some time. It's not, Pluto is at the end of Capricorn. The restructuring of our life, the bulldozing, the transformation process is not anything new to us. It's been underway for some time. And yet the faster moving planet, Venus, the calling of our heart has been really present and emerging, especially as the North Node has been moving through the sign of Taurus. So we've had this great draw and desire to create stability, growth, abundance. I recently did a podcast episode for Astrology Hub, and one of the questions was like, how do I end this period of famine in my life where I've been struggling financially? And it was interesting because the person had been struggling since 2008. That was the time when Pluto entered the sign of Capricorn. Many people in the beginning of 2008 and in the years that follow lost everything. They lost their homes, they lost their jobs, they lost all of their physical, financial security. And what we lost even after that was a sense of ground and stability in who we are, right? The cardinal axis is the cardinal cross of life. It's the cross of matter. And the fixed axis is what I consider the cross of identity, the face that we bring forward into the world after we're born from the womb. And it's not as though we have completely reshaped our identities, although I have met many people who have completely transformed their life since 2008. I know I'm one of them. If you had talked to me in that time, I think I've gone through even a few different lifetimes progressively from 2008 until 2018. That 10 years completely reshaped the surface of my life. And then from 2018 until present has been the most deep and powerful excavation and rebirth that I've ever been through, including a complete reshaping of my identity from being a financial advisor to being an astrologer, something that I could have never predicted if you had asked me in 2008 when I was working for the bank and, deeply steeped in the financial services world, which went through its own economic meltdown and transition and change. So we can prospectively look back at these different segments of our life from when Pluto entered Capricorn until the present moment. And then especially since Pluto has been in conjunction with Saturn, and then in conjunction with Jupiter, and in conjunction, that triple conjunction kicking off the time period of COVID and the 3 years of hermitage that most people underwent as Saturn was in Aquarius, squaring the nodal axis. So all of us are in the wake of what is yet to come in terms of, if we're always looking at the ocean. If the ocean is building, the waves and the storm and the wake and the break are all going to be at different places in people's lives, economically, emotionally, financially, physically, in terms of how we are showing up in the world, in terms of what we're doing. And this is really the end of the end. It's the turning of the wheel. It's the wheel of fate saying, okay, here you go. This is the last time that Pluto will be in Capricorn once it leaves in November of 2024 for good. All souls that are alive on this planet will not experience another Pluto in Capricorn in these bodies, right? If you believe in reincarnation and returning, of the soul into different forms, you might feel like I'm going to have another chance again at Pluto and Capricorn. But from the perspective of these physical bodies and these, lives that we're living, these birth charts that we're all with at this time, we're not going to see this Pluto and Capricorn time again beyond November of 2024. We'll spend 20 years with Pluto in Aquarius, and that will bring its own revolution and evolution. And this particular time right now, if we were having our pulse, our hand on the earth, our hand on the pulse of our lives, reflecting deeply, is calling us to a cardinal shift. Here, I have it here. In the I Ching, there is a hexagram that relates to this kind of change, and it's hexagram 49, radical change. And I'll read you the hexagram because this is from Hilary Barrett's book on the I Ching. It's a really beautiful and incredible book if you want to get it. Hexagram 49, radical change. Radical change. On your own day, there is truth and confidence. From the source, creating success. Constancy bears fruit, regrets vanish. And her description of this hexagram says, it is a time for transformation. The old Chinese character for radical change, which also means leather, shows an animal hide. This is the change, like a shaman putting on new skin to change your identity. And it is also the revolutionary change. This hexagram marks the day when the Zhou people and their allies marched out to meet the armies of the corrupt Shang dynasty and defeated them. You change the governing principle and bring about renewal. In the moment of change, there is truth, sincerity, and sure knowledge. And then the power of the whole unfolding creative process from the source through fruition to fulfillment can enter here and change the world. Naturally, regrets vanished along with the past to which they belong. The new time is coming. So the new time is coming, right? And in this hexagram, it describes several principles, and one of which is my absolute favorite statement in the I Ching. Constancy bears fruit. From the source, creating success, constancy bears fruit, regrets vanish, right? So that we might be facing losses, pieces of our lives that are out of alignment, out of integrity, that don't feel right. We might be facing challenging Pluto, power dynamics, system related. We have to really realize that we're in a system of oppression, a system of capitalism, a system of government, wherever we are, a system of war, and a system that is really benefits on our being oppressed. Benefits, we have a medicalized system that benefits from us being sick, not from us being well, from us being sick, right? We have a system of government. We have systems of oppression. We have systems that are in place that are holding people. We have economic systems which benefit a vast many and a very few, right? A vast many are oppressed by those systems, and a very few benefit from those systems, right? It is, absurd probably to most that Amazon.com would pay less in taxes than the average middle class family in proportion to their income, right? But these are systems that are in place. And when, it says radical change, constancy bears fruit. Constancy is referred to very often in the I Ching, and it's one of my favorite statements because it speaks to the Saturn capacity, constancy. It speaks to the constancy of a woman in many respects, where it's like we have to keep doing the things that we're doing to move in life, right? The laundry still needs to be done. Our teeth need to be brushed. When we're tending children, you have to take care of children, whether you feel like it or not. Parents don't get to like elect out of doing and caring for the well-being of their beloveds. If we have pets, we have to take care of them every day. These are sixth house matters, particularly. But the constancy of our lives is a sixth house matter. Constancy bears fruit. And in this case, from a Saturn perspective, the things that we work with, the deeper core evolutionary places where we face the turmoil, the struggles, the changes, the loss, the dynamics in our lives, the relationships, it's the constancy that bears fruit. This is how ultimately relationships can transform, through our own constancy. Not by expecting others to change, because that's never a place from the soul perspective where we have any power, right? Pluto is always going to be pointing us back to reclaiming our power and reconnecting our power to source. And what's interesting about this particular hexagram, fabulously, is it talks about on your own day, there is truth and confidence from the source creating success. Constancy bears fruit, regrets vanish. So then we can look at the places in our life where we hold regrets about this or that not happening, or this relation, like Venus retrograde can very much reflect deeper review periods of the relationships in our life, people from the past coming back, relational dynamics being resolved. And Venus, when she squared the nodes, she was the ruler, her resolution node was the north node. If you were holding that perspective, then there's something that ultimately needs to be purified from our life, right? We're going through a purification process. We could think about this from the perspective of all the blocks that we have to love have to be removed, reviewed, dismantled. We might have to recycle things in our life that haven't been working through constancy. And the constancy is really to look at how we communicate, what the deeper roots of our relational dynamics are, what the deeper callings of our energy. The sun is in Leo. That brings immense energy, peak brightness. Venus just reached her peak brightness before her retrograde will bring her back into the beams of the sun. And this will be one of those, progressive ways where she's walking back. Watch her. She's walking back towards the sun. Mercury crossed over her and is moving, into its sign of Virgo in that time. And then she comes back into the sun's beams, right? In the next time that the moon is in Cancer, same place, also moving itself towards its opposition to Pluto. So from the new moon to the return of the moon, we now see Juno opposite Pluto. And we also see the nodes, will have perfected their 3 squares by this point. And Mercury is now in its shadow for its retrograde in the sign of Virgo. So this summertime building time is all about taking us deeper and deeper into these retrograde cycles as Venus is crossing through the heart and we get to the new moon in Leo. Then we'll have Mercury pretty much preparing itself for its retrograde station. Now I'll get you to the retrograde station of Mercury, which is gonna ask us to look at every place of refinement that has come up in this time. I often think of Virgo as the accountant, that analytical capacity, the priest, the ability to really look at all the places in our life that aren't working, all the places that need to be fixed, repaired, all the broken places. And this is where the retrogrades can help us to accelerate a period of resolution, right? We're resolving core soul dynamics in this time. So we're going to be resolving Virgo soul dynamics, Venus soul dynamics, Pluto soul dynamics, Neptune soul dynamics, Saturn soul dynamics, and nodal soul dynamics. Think about this from the perspective of that the nodes always move backwards. They are always pointing us towards a soul dynamic resolution. And then when we have a planet that comes through a square or an aspect, a conjunction, to those nodes, that's where the karmic piece says, okay, time to turn this one, right? If our family members and our family history has brought us down the line, our ancestors have given us everything that we need in order to resolve a soul dynamic, if that's present in our chart. If that's emerging through a transit that's conjuncting to a very specific point in your natal chart, or through a transit that's activating, right? And this transit, this Pluto square, the nodal axis, is activating all of us. But for some people, this will hit very intimate and specific parts of their chart. And this is where, working with an astrologer, working with someone one-on-one to unpack these dynamics and make the best use of these times can be an incredibly powerful tool. I just had an apprentice session with a student where we really unpacked the core dynamics in her life and set up exactly what can support her in a ritual, in space, in the time during the Venus cycle to heal and to work with the things that she's been facing in her life. This is exactly what these resolution points, especially, Mercury retrograde is often blamed for things breaking down. And I had a teacher, one of my main teachers, Adam Summer, said it's a Mercury retrograde intervention. And I really like that statement, because Mercury is intervening. The thing that's breaking down in our life, the thing that's not working, is intervening to resolve that. If something breaks down, we have to either get rid of it, fix it, repair it, look at it, deal with it, address it in order to change. And what do we all want, right? Constancy bears fruit. From the source, we create success. From the source. So we look at the source of the issues in our life that have not been working, and that's the place where we can create change, radical change. What's radical change about? It's switching perspectives. And I recently did a class on my website. It's available free right now as a replay. Venus rules the nodes, where I talked very specifically about the shift in rulership from Venus ruling the north node to Venus ruling the south node. If we think about that perspective, that is a radical change, right? We're going from Venus ruling the dance of where we're pointing ourselves to, evolving towards, to her saying, no, 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 wait a second. We're going back to the past. We have to clean this up. We have to do something. We have to change something in order to resolve this. And from the source, if we would think of Pluto as pointing towards the source of our resolution, the Pluto polarity point will be these late degrees of Cancer, really where this new moon is about to be in a few days, where all, Juno is going to pass through, the sun is going to pass through, pointing us, illuminating us in the direction of that resolution. What's that resolution? It's the deepest and most tender parts, the parts of us that still feel betrayed, hurt, lost, abandoned, that still are dealing with relational dynamics that don't serve us, places where we give ourselves away. I received a message in my dream last night that I'll share with you, which is, it's an interesting message to receive. And whenever I receive a message from spirit, it takes me several days to meditate on it. But the message was, you cannot keep going to somebody's empty cup trying to get wet, right? You cannot keep going to somebody's empty cup trying to get wet. And whether that's about getting our needs fulfilled from somebody who's emotionally, physically, mentally unavailable, whether that's our cup being empty from exhaustion, whether that's, trying to source our emotional fulfillment, but we're getting lost in substances and, distracting ourselves with social media or marijuana or whatever it is, right? Any substance. And I even thought about it. I turned that on myself. Like, where am I trying to fill my cup with stuff instead of filling my cup with source? You cannot keep going to somebody's empty cup trying to get wet. And right, what is this Cancer new moon? It's an immersion in water. Where does the water remain with us during these retrograde cycles? Neptune and Saturn, they're pointing to the source of our daily devotion. They're pointing to the deeper places of healing and forgiveness. And that's really what the path of purification is all about. Even the path of forgiveness. It's not about our lives remaining in a state of suffering, penance and shame and guilt and all those things that we can just carry with us for years. It's about replenishing our cup by letting go. It's like if we have a relationship, a family member where we haven't been able to resolve the dynamic with that family relationship, forgiving and letting go of all that past baggage is the only way to replenish our cup, not by trying to resolve things necessarily with the person. There are many times, and I think many miracles, and I always hold space for miracles because they're natural and they want to happen in our lives. They're God's way of really showing us, Source's way of pointing us back to the truth of that we don't have to be in control. We weren't in control of our birth. We're not in control of our death. We are, the illusion of control seems to permeate reality, and we can find all sorts of ways to fill the feeling of trying to control things. But the reality is that so much of what we call fate is the realization that things are out of the control of our lives. And in that surrender to grace, in that acceptance of the situation that we can't change, in finding gratitude for where we are, for what is, in rooting ourselves in a physical and a spiritual discipline, we can make it through the most difficult times in our lives. It has been my yoga practice, my spiritual practice, mantra practice, meditation practice, deep practices of purification, practices of ceremony, ritual that have saved my life, that have, helped me to evolve beyond states of depression, anxiety, deep, deep places of suffering that I just felt like, oh, I can't get out of this. I don't know how to get out of this. And there have been many instances of miracles in my life that have, pushed me through. And so here we get with these retrograde periods, and you're going to see Mercury make its retrograde conjunction with the sun in this latter part of the year as Venus is moving to her station. She's direct. It's interesting what happens. And I sort of skipped over it in this early part of September, but I'll just go back so you can see the fun of this. So Venus gets to her station degree of 12 degrees Leo, and she's ruling over this Jupiter in the sign of Taurus. Uranus is retrograde already. Chiron is retrograde already. I have a, full listing of retrogrades that I can, if anyone wants my full retrograde guide, send me an email or subscribe to my mailing list, and I will post that on my website with this video. There is, there's this interesting thing that happens because we watched Jupiter. So we watched Mercury. I'm going to go back a little bit. Just bear with me as I go back. The last Mercury retrograde period that we had was in the sign of Taurus, from 5 to 15 degrees Taurus. Jupiter's retrograde is also in the sign of Taurus, from 5 to 15 degrees Taurus. So here we have Venus all this time. She ruled over Mercury's last retrograde. She's, doing her own thing, retrograde. She's ruling over Mercury's retrograde in Virgo, because vis-a-vis her being ruled by the sun and the sun being in Virgo, and it goes back to Mercury. So their relationship is there together. They're interwoven in this retrograde cycle, just to take note of that. Mars is in Libra responding to Venus. So he's tied up in this whole retrograde cycle. And then we have Venus stations direct. And the very next day, there goes Jupiter, while the moon is with Jupiter in the sign of Taurus. So we get the whole deal all over again. Now Jupiter's going to go back in his retrograde during that time. And then the next day, Mercury makes its cazimi, its inferior conjunction with the sun in the sign of Virgo. So just, really looking at like all the wheels that are turning, right? All these wheels, they're all intertwined. When we get into the cardinal axis of our life being shifted, and think about it from this perspective, you can't pull on the money thread without it pulling on the income and the work life. You can't pull on the family thread without it pulling on the children and the relationships. You can't pull on, any thread in the ball of yarn of your life without it being interwoven with another thread. And as things in our life are simultaneously breaking down, there's going to be, a lot of shaky ground, right? Right. Shaky ground is a good way to think of this particular time. But if you listen to that radical change hexagram, it says that from the source, creating success, constancy bears fruit. That means stick with it, stay true to the process, trust the process of what's breaking down, develop trust in the process of what's not working, needing to be resolved. Regrets vanish. So that can reflect this whole dynamic of like what happens when something breaks down and then you go to try and get it fixed, and then there's a delay in something else, and then someone else comes into your life who ends up being able to help you with the thing that you need fixing, and exactly at the right time, all the things line up, and finally by the end you're like wiping the sweat off your brow and looking back and saying, oh, thank God it all happened that way. Because if it wasn't for this leading to that, and that leading to this, and this breaking down, and that happening, I wouldn't have landed here in the holy arms of my beloved. I wouldn't have landed here in this way. I wouldn't have landed here in this place in my life where I can really feel with my whole heart that everything that I'm doing now is aligned from my core values, my core desires. And it's not, not by any means am I saying like, oh, it might, there might be hardships, there might be challenges. Oh, that whole Mercury retrograde is gonna oppose Saturn and oppose Neptune. These are tests of faith, my friends, tests of fate and tests of faith and tests of resolution. And, humility is our friend. My favorite quote from Bill W. It's on a little card that he used to have on his desk, and I'm going to paraphrase it. But the quote is, humility is a perpetual quietness of heart in the face of change. So this means to me, it's not as though we, won't face incredible challenges. It's not as though we might not fall to our knees many times, but it's a perpetual quietness of heart. It's a staying on the inside of us, of our lives, on the inside of our process, and trusting it. And there you see Mercury stations direct September 15th. And as we move along towards the end of the year, we're going to get, beyond Pluto, not so being in tight square to the nodes, Venus will make her third square to Jupiter. I would call this the resolution square. Here, I passed it and just get back there. This is like a very relational resolution square. She said Jupiter still got work to do here, and it's going to go all the way back to 5 degrees Taurus with Uranus. But first she squares Jupiter, and then, she moves on. Juno's traveling with her. So this is all about our deeper commitments to the life and the light of our life that we are wanting to bring forward through this resolution period, right? Hold fast to your heart, friends, because if we develop greater self-love, if we develop deeper capacity to meet ourselves and others, if we resolve our communication in relationships, if we heal and forgive the past, if we get really clear about what we're doing with our money, and we get really organized and on point about where we're pointing our direction being that relationship is about togetherness of two whole beings being together, right? That means our truth and our voice and our wholeness meets the truth and the voice and the wholeness of another. If we're clear about the calling to reclaim our power and source ourselves not from someone else's empty cup, but from our own, from the source of our own cup, from the source of our own self-value, self-love, our own inner authority, then as all these planetary bodies, they're all going to be moving. I'm going to speed up the pace of this movement just so we can get here. They're moving towards the south node. Everybody one by one. Mars first, crossing the south node, squaring Pluto, right? Then we get Venus clearing her shadow and entering the sign of Virgo. And we're going to have the eclipse season. I'll do a completely separate video on the eclipses. I'm also going to be doing a Gemini moon chit chat with my fellow Moonies later on eclipses. So stay tuned for that, friends. But we got Mercury comes through after and squares Pluto. Then we've got the sun coming through, and we get a nice, this is a first quarter square with the sun squaring Pluto. Wow, right? All these squares, crisis of consciousness. What has to change? What has to change? And if we get all different pieces resolved in that, I just see like different mechanism pieces, and one mechanism clicks into the other mechanism, and then the next one clicks into the next, and pretty soon, click, 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 we resolve, right? We move. Saturn gets to 0 degrees of Pisces. That's the place where Saturn began when it entered. So think about, by the time we get to October, we're going to be going back to where Saturn entered Pisces and bringing back all the pieces that started during that time, but having a much deeper, clearer sense of where our faith really comes from. I made a painting here the other day where I said, to pray, we ask, we wait, and then we receive. And somebody pointed out to me that, like, it isn't waiting, it's believing. But I think of it as like waiting, because we're not waiting for something else. We're working the internal resolution, right? And in many ways, the waiting is the space between where we've had total faith in the outcome of what we desire and the realization of that being actually fulfilled, that it actually is done, right? So you could call, like, that's like the waiting, the 9 months from when conception occurs to the baby is born. It wasn't like the baby didn't exist the whole time. And I'm not just talking about the whole time, like, the seed of you was in your grandmother when she was in your great grandmother. The seed of you, the egg of you, of your mother's mother's mother, was in your great grandmother. That's how far back you existed in time and space. Now, that doesn't say that you're here now with me and you've lived this whole life up until this point. So the seed of something that you're becoming is also very much present inside of you right now, right here and now, even though you have no idea. You have not met that person. You do not know those thoughts, those ideas, all this. And you might think that that's waiting, but it's not waiting. It's just space. And Saturn has to do with the time, space, reality, that the structures of our life that we believe have to take shape in order for things to come to form, right? So that baby that you desire and to be born into the world already exists as a seed, a sparkle in someone's eye, and an egg in someone's body, and a thought in someone's mind, and a dream in someone's reality. All the things of your life, all the desires of your heart are already have to be. In the same way, we can know the path of the stars all the way out into the future of 2042 right now. Exactly every moment, every space. I'm like, how did they do that? How do they do that? That they know exactly where Pluto's going to be on this day. Here, I'll change it. I'll show you right now. In 2042, just to illustrate a point. Pluto will be retrograde at 27 degrees of Aquarius, right? It's going to be October, so the sun will still be in Scorpio. Venus will be retrograde on the south node. Holy moly, look at that. We'll have Uranus and Chiron in the sign of Leo, where Venus was during her retrograde. Jupiter will be in its own sign with Mars. In it's like, oh my God, wow, what a different reality that will be. We don't even know ourselves then. But I'm going to go back to 2023 now, just because we want to wrap up before dinner time. And we're going to be seeing Venus as she approaches the South Node, moving through her time in Libra and moving into her square with Pluto right around Thanksgiving time. Give thanks for all the changes that have happened in our life between now and then. And I guarantee you, lots will have changed, my friends. That is to be sure. And, that's the one thing, the ultimate place where we can rest our faith in. Not, we are certainty seeking creatures. Uranus will be still retrograde in Taurus, ruled by that Venus on the South Node. And we can be certain that things will have changed. Neptune will be back to 24 degrees of Pisces. Saturn will be direct. You can see how much is direct by now. We're down to the last two stragglers, or four stragglers, sorry. Four. So we've got Neptune, Chiron, Jupiter, and Uranus as our stragglers at the end of the year here, who are moving direct. And then there's Venus squaring Pluto, December 2nd, right at the last month of the year. And we've got Mercury in Capricorn, Mars with the sun in the sign of Sagittarius. And we're going to get to Jupiter stationing direct just here in a little bit. We get to the end of the year. Mercury stations retrograde on December 13th. We get our last retrograde. Now, all of the retrogrades this year for Mercury have all been in earth signs. So think about that, how that's deeply connected. Saturn ruling Capricorn, Venus ruling Taurus, Mercury in its own sign in Virgo. So the Mercury retrogrades are, again, all trining each other, all intertwined, all dealing with these fundamental aspects of our life. I think it's going to be very heavily resource focused, especially for the Virgo, whatever was coming up for you in the Taurus retrograde, hearken back to that when you're referencing the Jupiter retrograde period, because that will also correspond with the sun being in Sagittarius, Mars being in Sagittarius. So there's an interconnection there if you can go back and think about things in your life from that time. And then, and I skipped over, but Venus will oppose Jupiter when she's in Scorpio, and she'll move with Lilith there in that time towards the end of the year. I think this is a pretty powerful, if we consider Lilith as the natural reclamation of the feminine soul. For the Jeffrey Wolf Green Association of Evolutionary Astrologers, we'll be hosting an online conference, an EA online conference in October 6th, 7th, and 8th, a whole weekend, all online, with 15 different talks and workshops. And one of them will be a presentation on Lilith as the root of the soul, which I'm super looking forward to. I think it's going to be an amazing conference the whole weekend. But here we get to the end of December and the ingress of the sun into Capricorn at the solstice point, and it's also corresponding with this Mercury retrograde and Pluto ending up back at the same degree of Capricorn, but now direct, right? where it was when it squared the nodal axis. So that, to me, this intertwines a lot of the Mercury resolution with the new beginning that we're ending the year. If I feel this sort of solemn energy of really completing whole cycles, whole life segment cycles, and preparing for a new year that is completely different than the one that we've just had. And most of the time we look forward to the end of the year because of that, right? We look forward to the closing, the winter, the deep cycle ending, at least from a Gregorian calendar perspective. But we end this year with Jupiter stationing direct on December 31st. Like, to me, that sums up the whole thing. It's like this whole end of the year that I've just encapsulated in less than an hour now boils down to these retrograde cycles ending right at the end of the year. And now Mercury will still be retrograde for a little bit in Sagittarius, and there'll be some time in the beginning of the year where Mercury will be still clearing its shadow. And I'm not going to go any further than January 1st. I'll save that for next year. But I think that it's a pinnacle point of resolution, that all of the deeper work that we've been doing, and Venus is in Sagittarius. So Venus is in Jupiter's sign and Jupiter is in Venus's sign. So this whole time from when they've been working it out, they're working together. And when we come to the end of this cycle, I think that they finally close that, and we get to look forward to some really cool new stuff in 2024 and beyond. So, my friends, back to the present moment, thank you so much for joining me. You can, as always, find me at astrologywithmichelle.com. You can book a session with me. If you're an astrology student and deeply steeped in this work, you can book these soul apprentice sessions. I offer them on a monthly subscription. They're a way to work with me one-on-one if you want to dive into dynamics in your own chart. There's lots of different ways to work with me. In my evolution student membership, I do a monthly transmission, and I do a new moon ceremony, and I have a new moon ceremony coming up for this Cancer new moon, and it is a tender one, friends. I really feel all that we're working through in the collective, and I pray that it be filled with grace and ease, and that your constancy bears fruit, brings about the radical change in your life that you desire. So thanks so much for listening. As always, leave your comments, like this video, and subscribe to the EA Zoom channel. Really awesome stuff happening here in this little land of evolutionary astrology. So take care, my friends. Bye for now.